Alright, so it's been over a week now since the Fate collab has started in Honkai Star Rail, and I know there's been a lot of different opinions going around ever since the collab dropped. So today I just want to do a discussion with you all, talking about my thoughts of the collab here. And I am going to split it into three categories here for the three main parts of the collab, being the Fate Stay Night combat event, the collab characters that we got, Saber and Archer, and then lastly, the collab story quest, which means there are going to be spoilers for the story quest in this video. So if you haven't played the quest yet, I definitely do recommend doing that because we are going to be talking about the quest at length here. So going into the first category here, which is the collab event. Now I will say I have not actually played the collab event yet, but I did do my due diligence at the bare minimum, seeing what the gameplay is. And it is pretty much just a combat event, so it's not something that I think is going to be, bad by any means, but it's not going to be anything spectacular. Right? I think it's just going to be a very run-of-the-mill kind of event that'll be good for players to do to get rewards, and there are a good amount of rewards from it. 1400 Stellar Jade is definitely nothing to scoff at, but HSR's biggest issue when it comes to events isn't really the content in the events for the most part. It's the fact that they're only releasing 2 per patch, or at least they have been ever since the beginning of Emporius, which just does not serve as enough content for a lot of players. So that is something to really keep in mind when it comes to events. But besides that, I feel like anytime they implement a combat event, it's usually fine. Some may be slightly better or slightly worse than others, but all in all, they're usually not complete misses, so I feel like the event itself is probably fine. Next up, to talk about the collab characters here, I think these two, both Saber and Archer, are probably by far the best part of this collab. They're both honestly really fun. Archer, especially with him being free, not only is he really fun to use, but he's also very good. We'll see how long that lasts for, obviously, because we all know about the power creep in Honkai Star Rail, so we'll see if Archer's going to stand the test of time. But not only is he very fun, but he also brought Sparkle back into some form of relevance, because I know so many people, including myself, pulled for Sparkle when she dropped. Then she ended up not being very good in a lot of places, so she was kind of just sitting there. But now that Archer's here and really likes Sparkle, I'm using my Sparkle a lot more often now, which we definitely do love to see as well. And Archer just feels very rewarding to play, as long as you're really playing around his skill mechanics to get a ton of damage on enemies. And of course, if you're someone who's gonna go for Eidolons for Archer, and if you're like me and you got the signature light cone just based on doing 200 limited pulls during 3.4, then you're going to get rewarded even more for that. But regardless of if you're running easy or S0, or if you have any kind of vertical investment, Archer is still very fun to play. And then when we go to Saber, Saber is a very straightforward character to play, and she is still very good. I do like her damage and her overall playstyle, especially with the Excalibur spam, but that is going to make her very energy hungry, and for new players it could be a little rough for Saber because her best team is going to be a team that can give her a lot of energy, which can be something like Sunday, Robin, and Huohuo, which for a lot of players besides Sunday, who's rerunning right now, it could be some time, especially for people who just started to play for the Fate collab. It's probably going to be some time before they can actually get this kind of team set up, so they may not be using Saber at her full potential. But at the same time, it shouldn't be as bad because Saber's banner is going to be up for a long time, at least 3 patches from what we know. So there's going to be a good amount of time for people to get other characters that could work well with her, and then get her as well, try to get her light cone, which I'm still trying to get her light cone for me. But it has been very good to use these characters so far, and I really am excited to see more of them and get some more endgame resets as well, because I feel like you can only do the same fight so many times, which I guess is another issue of Honkai Star Rail that we're not really going to go into here, because I want to keep this to just being about the collab. But it has been very fun to use Archer and Saber, and the more fights we get, the more fun I'm going to have with them, honestly. And the last thing I want to talk about for characters is, I'm honestly just still kind of sad that Lancer was just an NPC and not a playable character. I feel like his kit could have been really cool as well, but it is what it is at the end of the day. We'll talk more about him with the story right now, but overall I think the characters are very good for what they were, and they definitely did put a lot of love into them as well, which is something I really do love to see, because I feel like if you do a collab and you don't put love into the characters, it doesn't really feel that great. So I am glad that as someone who enjoys the gameplay of Honkai Star Rail, I definitely do like that the characters are very good and very fun. So now let's move on to the story, which I'm gonna flat out say, of the 3 parts of it here, is probably the weakest part. Obviously, if the event is super bad, then that might, change things, but based on my assumption, based on how combat events go for Star Rail, I doubt it's going to be the worst part, especially since I do relatively enjoy combat events, because while it is just going to be me putting the game on auto, it doesn't like bore me in a way that some other events have. And this story quest overall did have some really hyper cool moments during it, so I'm not going to fully just trash on it, because there were some good parts, which then again, Honkai Star Rail always has at least a couple, hyper exciting things happening. Like, the 3 main things I really liked was the end fight scene with all of us together fighting against Odie. I really liked the scene at the end with Pom Pom and Mikhail talking, which is really cool because like Pom Pom hadn't seen Mikhail in like so many years. So that was also a really nice scene, especially for like lore enjoyers. And lastly, I really like the dynamics, honestly, between the Fate Servants and the Star Rail characters. So, Aventurine and Archer, Boot Hill and Lancer, obviously Trailblazer and Saber as well. Those are honestly some really cool dynamics to see throughout, which definitely was a nice touch to the story as well. And also, the servant that Robin had as well was also a very nice addition as well. And actually had a pretty interesting story that kind of surprised me, to be completely honest. But the biggest issue I have with the story quest here is that it was advertised as like the Pentaconian Holy Grail War, but it really didn't have that vibe. And this is coming from someone who has watched Unlimited Blade Works. I've watched Fate Zero. I haven't watched all of Heaven's Feel yet, which I really need to get back to, but comparing all of those Holy Grail Wars to this, it really just didn't have the same kind of vibe. And I feel like the biggest contributor to that is the fact that immediately they were like, okay, something's wrong, we need to work together, which is something I think happens towards the later stages of the war in other like Fate series that I've watched. So it kind of didn't feel as, true to what Fate is, which I feel like they kind of wanted to be true to Fate, but at the same time make it fit within Honkai Star Rail. So I think in terms of like the concept and the way they handled the Holy Grail War in the quest, I think it could have been done better. But there were 2 parts of this quest that I think could have either just been shortened or reworked entirely to give us a better experience. The first part of this, and I'm sure you're probably expecting this, it was the silent movie part with the assassin Noble Phantasm. I think that it's interesting in concept, but it lasted for way too long. I actually went back into my stream VOD and I was in this section for almost an hour, which is not great. At a point, I wasn't even letting like some of the dialogue fully play out because it wasn't voiced. So being in that for an hour is not great, especially if it's a 4-hour quest. Like a fourth of this quest is just me in silence, which is just not it for a story that of this length. I feel like if it was a shorter part, or maybe like broken up into much smaller segments, it could have worked well. But I think that kind of like silent movie thing, it's not a great addition for a game. I think that would work better if there was more like a Honkai Star Rail anime, or if that was actually like part of like a Fate series. I think a silent movie thing could work a little better there. But it just felt super dragged out in the game setting thing. And when it ended, I was actually like very happy it was over, which I think when you're writing a story for people to enjoy, they shouldn't be grateful or happy that a part of a story is over. So that part, I feel like that part just didn't stick the landing. Like, interesting concept, but execution was just not it. And then the other part, which I didn't have as many problems with this as the silent movie part. I just think that the Forced Dream by Caster was a little too long. Like, not crazy, because we did have some cool moments, seeing Saber's pass as well, and certain parts of like the Trailblazer like dream scenario was also cool, but I feel like the Trailblazer part was a little too long, in all honesty. It just felt like they were dragging it with like having us work in the like space station. It felt like the Trailblazer's dream world was going to a 9 to 5, which is kind of crazy. But I definitely think that the thing that redeems this, outside of like the cool moments with Saber and everything, is that it does have a cool cutscene as the payoff for it. It's not like the silent movie part where it just, you know, ends after you fight Aventurine. But for this part, it actually has a cool cutscene with you and Saber waking up at the same time and getting everyone else to wake up and moving into the final boss fight. So it did have that as a plus, but all in all, I think overall for this story quest, there were definitely parts that could have been a lot better, but I'm not going to rate it an absolute 0, and I don't think it's the worst quest in the game here. So that's really all my thoughts when it comes to the Fate collab. I did cover the main sort of points there. Hopefully, once the survey comes out for 3.4 here, we'll be able to have a spot to talk about the collab as well. Because I think that if they do another collab in the future, maybe it's with more Fate characters, maybe it's with another series entirely. Hopefully we can give them some good advice or like criticisms to make the next collab better, because there were some really good things for this collab, but us having to wait a year for a story quest of that quality just does not sit right, especially when you consider that it's right after the best Amphorius quest so far, right? So because it was right after that Finon quest too, like we played the Finon quest and then a week later we played the Fate quest here, it just didn't feel like that same level of quality was given to it. And I feel like for a collab, obviously it doesn't have to be the best thing in the world, but it shouldn't be one of the least enjoyable quests either. But that's really gonna be it for me. I'd love to see what you all think about the Fate collab in the comments down below. I still overall do enjoy it, since I do get a lot of my enjoyment of these games from the actual characters and using them. So that is a good thing for me, but I know a lot of other people are more so invested in the story and lore. So I'd love to see other opinions in the comments down below, but I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed and want to see more content from me, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But with that, everyone, I will see you all next time.